And welcome back to the Lore and Valor podcast. I am joined once again by my friends and fellow Bane authors, Kacey, who is currently a serving Air Force helicopter pilot, though not for much longer. And
Maybe not by the time this airs.
Definitely not by the time this airs.
Yeah.
And a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, as well as a veteran of, you did time in Iraq, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. And Joelle Presby.
I know, right?
and Joelle Presby, another Bane author of science fiction and fantasy, who is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis and a veteran nuclear tracked naval surface warfare officer.
Yes.
I said that right?
Yeah. Hey, you got it.
Awesome. We knuckle draggers can occasionally get facts right if our noses are rubbed in them often enough.
By the time we get through this series, like, you'll just rattle it off. Awesome.
And I'm going to try something different today. I'm actually going to let our colleague Joelle kind of steer the conversation, and I'll chime in from the peanut gallery. So, Joelle?
And today, we're again talking about Arcane, and remember, spoilers. So if you haven't seen episode 3 yet, stop, go watch it. So this,
like, for real, we're totally not kidding.
Yeah, you definitely need to watch this episode before we talk about it, because there's stuff you did not see coming.
Yes. This episode is called The Base Violence Necessary for Change. And I just want to say, they do a great job with episode titles.
Dude, the titling, the whole series.
And it's also really makes you want to watch it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting off with the cliffhanger from episode 2 and finding out, okay, so what is going to happen with Zahn and Piltover, and how's it all going to work? And Marcus, the lieutenant, has seen his supervisor making deals and has decided that he's going to make deals too. Except, oh my goodness, this is not going well. So we've got Marcus making deals with Silco, and we finally understand some of why the weirdness that happened in episode 1 and episode 2 of people talking about things and leaving hints that cause little children to think we can go and find out. We can go and do an easy mission.
Yeah.
When actually maybe Silco and Marcus didn't know that they were going to cause this to happen, but they've left the breadcrumbs that in some ways the villains are responsible from this from the beginning. It's not just the good guys being young and idiotic.
Yeah, I think that the beginning of this episode was what really made, like, crystallized for me that, like, oh, dude, we're dealing with some master storytellers here, because this is the point at which the foreshadowing really starts to pay off. And you're like, oh, okay. So that scene in the beginning where you're showing this, like, psychopathic dude, like, you know, injecting some glowy stuff into a cat who then becomes this monster cat. Like, that wasn't just showing the villain, which is a valid thing to do in a story. It wasn't just the introduction of a character. That whole sequence was still foreshadowing, and being able to take something and give it those two, like those two purposes at the same time. Like, you know, that's what I aspire to.
Beauty, because they don't get a 17 novel arc to tell this story. They've got a limited number of episodes, and everything needs to matter if they're going to tell a detailed story, and they are giving us a detailed story.
Yeah, for sure. And then,
You're absolutely right.
I know a lot of writers who swear by using, like, screenwriting techniques for exactly that reason, right? You know, because it's a clean way to tell a story. It's, you know, it cuts down on, I mean, I love Papa Tolkien as much as anyone else, but it cuts down on the Tom Bombadils of the world, you know, and it's just like, it makes it very, very concise, which may or may not be what you're trying to go for as a writer, you know, writing books. Sorry.
Because you screenwriters aren't real writers.
As a prose writer who's writing like novels or whatever, novelist, if you will, that maybe you're going for the huge sweeping epic fantasy, and you want to take the time to build out all of this stuff. But I gotta admire the skill that it takes to be able to take something like that and to give you. And I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, Joelle, but
go for it.
To give you a character at the very beginning that is so obviously despicable. I mean, he didn't murder. He used a cat in an experiment. Like, that's what's that show on Netflix? Don't F with cats, right? Like that's like a law of the internet, right? And that's exactly what he does. And so, okay, cool. Bad dude.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in this episode, we start to not only see his motivations, which is, like we talked about on the last episode of Joint Fires that we're talking about here. We talked about how, you put as a storyteller, you put your audience into the character's shoes to make them sympathetic, which they also do here in episode 3 very, very skillfully and beautifully, again, with the art of, the sort of drowning sequences and stuff. But not only do they do that, they, because of the seeds that they planted in that scene that established him as a despicable human, now they're starting to come to fruition when you put them together with those understanding his backstory, understanding where he's coming from, and also starting to see what he's trying to get to, what his motivations are. So, while I think just getting at Vander was part of his goal, there's another, there are other deeper goals there, and we're just starting to get a glimpse of those in this episode, and I think it's really cool.
And real quick to summarize, for those who've seen all of Arcane and maybe don't remember exactly what's going on in episode 3, this is where Vander has turned himself over to the authorities of Zon and claimed responsibility for the explosion, and which at first I thought wasn't possible. I thought he would never sacrifice anybody because I thought he would have to sacrifice a child for them to believe it. But they've accepted him as a sort of a payment,
a scapegoat.
Yes, yep. as a scapegoat. But then Silco comes in with his forces and attacks the Piltover guards and takes him captive, but has set it up so that Vi and her buddies think that they can go in and rescue him. And then we get to know, we get the moment with when Vander and Silco are discussing their past and how they became adversaries. I was going to say frenemies, but they're well past frenemies.
Yeah. And it's, this whole episode was such a turning point for me, because at the beginning you see Vander, the very beginning of the series, like the opening sequence, you see Vander, he's on this bridge, he's like, in
fighting the
enforcers, and he sees these two kids, and the two kids see him, and he takes these kids, and you're like, okay, cool, he's a good guy, right? And just like I asked in last episode, is it just because we saw him first? And it isn't, because
do the good thing first,
and we saw him do the good thing, right? We saw him, take the kids under his wing, and he obviously raised the kids. So, he's not necessarily like evil, but maybe he is. I don't know, because now we're starting to see that, like, okay, so he and Silco were like brothers, and we don't know the reason.
Prologue. Yeah.
Or do we know the reason? Did they give us the reason why he?
You don't.
If they gave us the reason, I don't fully understand it yet, and I watched it twice.
It was a betrayal. There was, he betrayed Silco, and I don't think we know why yet. But he betrayed him and then tried to drown him.
And that's part of the reason Silco looks the way he looks, and he's damaged. And furthermore, I'd say that while they don't give us the reason, I think even in this episode, I put together that it's like you see in a lot of resistance movements, insurgencies, there's a split. You know, you
Yeah.
no longer agree about where the movement is going, and one person is going to dictate how it goes.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Now I remember.
you try to
Sorry.
remove the other lead. You see it all the time,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
with people just being like, oh no, not that, like, you are going to lead us down a bad path. I
Right.
can't vote you out. I can't go to a police force. So if I don't want you to be constantly opposing what I'm trying to do, and if what I'm trying to do is so important to me that it's literally life and death, I'm trying to protect my children from a harsh world that doesn't care how much we want justice, you gotta go. You know,
Yeah.
like, so I now I don't know that it ever explicitly says that, but from everything they've set up in these 3 episodes, that's how I instantly read it like that. I was like, yeah, no, they disagreed about the future of Zahn, and
Yeah.
it came to violence. Like, there was no other way. Otherwise, Silco was going to cause a war at some point. So
Right.
Vonda felt he had to try and kill him.
I think I'm wondering if, because I feel like I had the impression that it had a lot to do with the arrangement that Vonda ultimately ended up having with what was her name, the lead
Grayson.
enforcer. What? Grayson, yeah.
Grayson.
Which she's
allowed a separate piece, if you will.
Yeah, she's done.
Piece
She's
in our
dead.
time.
They kill her.
Yeah.
Yeah, great character, and they totally turn her into a fine pink mist.
But they did so for a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was not a you know, Game of Thrones, like, oh, this is just to torture the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not simple chance and anarchy. Her death actually serves a dramatic purpose.
Yeah.
As does Vonder's.
So many deaths.
Yeah. This is a bloody episode.
Yeah, very bloody episode. So Joelle, last time we were together recording, you know, minutes and minutes ago, because we're batch recording these a little bit. Last time we were together, you pointed out correctly that no one's telling Powder what's up.
Right. In episode 2. Vonda and Vi are talking, and Vi is starting to see what's going on. It gets some hints of how the balance of power has happened through the arrangement with Grayson that Vonder's got. But Powder isn't on screen. And then here again, Vi and her buddies seem to have taken a lesson from the past few episodes, as if, you know, they've been paying attention to their own lives, which, you know, I'm like, yes, good child. You've got something. You're learning something.
Learn something.
No,
yeah.
Learn differently.
Learn something else.
Well, and that's the trick, right?
Powder behind when they go to rescue their father figure.
Yeah. And instead of her staying behind, she becomes a free radical, right?
Right. Because she is aware enough to realize that they went in, and that there are guards all around, and that they thought there were no guards, but now Silco's people are all everywhere, so obviously they need help. And she pulls out her magic rock and has this brilliant insight, and my little engineer's heart is quaking, and I'm thinking, well, okay, it's a cartoon, and probably there are no engineers on the staff, so they'll let it work the first time. They don't have to have a rigorous testing and evaluation process. And then no, they did have an engineer on the staff. They know it always fails the first time. And then when things go boom, there's no such thing as a precision hand grenade.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. And you're right, Joelle, you hit on something really cool about this show, is right up until this episode, you could mistake this for a somewhat fanciful, light and fun magical steampunk adventure. And all of a sudden it's not.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's not. It's grounded. There are stakes. There are consequences. Right. You don't get away with doing something stupid. You don't necessarily get away with even doing the right thing, because that's life too. You know, like, you can do the absolute right thing as best you can with the knowledge you have, and there are still terrible consequences for it. Especially in episode 2, when they let Caitlin be not only lived but
no sign there anything happened to her, I thought, oh, this is a lighter show than I thought it was from the way the art was. I thought it was kind of dark, but no, it's a lighted half. Nobody's going to be badly injured.
My kids could watch this. No.
I mean, maybe your older one.
Yeah,
like,
my older one could, but yeah,
I think I let my 13-year-old watch this. Probably, I think she can handle it emotionally. But yeah. No, it's dark as fuck, y'all.
It's dark. Yeah, it's dark AF. Yeah.
Yeah, because they don't even stop there, right? Like, we're going through the rescue, and like I said, like Joelle pointed out in the last episode, Powder doesn't know what's going on. No one's bringing her in. No one's explaining the situation adequately to her, and she's a smart kid and she knows how to get around. So there she is in the midst of it all. And like you said, Joelle, there's, explosives are dicey even when you're a trained professional, right? Engineers are very cautious with their explosives.
And unlike Jace, who on the other side of this economic divide, who visually at least appears to be about double her age, who is the other engineer character in the show. And
seems to have instruments and things with which to measure and
data. Yeah. He's got a ton of data. Yeah.
People that's why he could produce all these things and not have explosions in his own lab.
Yeah, you're not wrong. That's a subplot that I feel like it's necessary to this episode, but I always forget about it, that Victor and Jace are working to get their lab together in this episode. It's just that the drama with Vi and Vonder and Silco is so intense that I always forget that's a part of this episode, even though it's very important to the future of the series. Right. But it's just so intense and so heartbreaking too, because it is usually, I find, when there's miscommunication in a story, it's often cheap. Like, it's often cheap. It's often like, you're an idiot. You just should have told them. And now you're broken up, or someone died, or the bad guy got out of prison, or whatever, because you're a moron and didn't use the mouth God gave you to communicate important information.
If there were more blunt people of my personality type in the story, this never would have happened.
No shit. I'm looking at you, Last Jedi, Admiral Holdo. But for real though, like these miscommunications though, I feel like they're all handled in a way where it's like, no, you might do that. You might forget. You might not tell your 11-year-old what's going on. You might fail to understand that she's cottoning on to more than you think she is, and let her get into trouble. It's real, and it feels like it's the beauty of writing intention, I think, in this instance, is that they have people screw up, but in ways if you're honest with yourself, you might screw up. They're not too stupid to live. They just were busy and stressed and didn't think about it. Didn't consider that angle of all the angles they're trying to consider and all the things they're accounting for. They missed one.
And it's kind of interesting because I kind of had to check myself a little bit at the end because I was watching this. So full disclosure, this episode made me Team Powder, 100% Team Powder.
Yes.
And she's probably super evil, but as of right now, fuck that other girl. Seriously, like.
It's hard to hear. Go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
But that's why I'm saying I kind of had to check myself a little bit because I'm looking at this and I'm like, she created a disaster, right? She had
a second disaster, inspired by the first disaster.
Right. She created a second disaster. She, because of her. Vonder's dead, although he was probably going to die anyway from the whatever stuff. The shimmer, yeah. But we didn't know that, and Vi certainly doesn't know that, but their two brothers are dead because of the explosion that she created. And
they hardly got any screen time with their deaths.
Right. Yeah. It was just, they're gone. And but Powder doesn't necessarily know that at first, and all she knows is that she came, to try and rescue her sister, and her sister just like turned on her and was like, you ruin everything, and then like left her. And so she's like, come back, please. And she's pleading with her, you're all I have, come back. And that was the moment where I was like, but But then I had to think about it, and I had to realize that, you know, I'm a 45-year-old mother of 2. And when a child is pleading in the street for me to come to them, I'm going to come to them.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Vi's 16, and just seeing everyone she cares about, minus the little girl in the alley, like destroyed.
Her last parent figure has just died.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And her sister
Now,
She
kind of
didn't lose
killed
her
him.
mom. She lost her last parent figure.
Right,
Mhm.
right. Now, I think that if, and maybe this is just my personality and the way that I am. I mean, I was raised as an oldest. Well, I am an oldest sibling, right? And I often had to take care of my younger siblings a little bit. And so for me, I have a hard time imagining that I wouldn't still cling to my sister because that's all I have left now, right?
Yeah, but I think it's an understandable human reaction that Vi would react oppositely, and I
It
don't think
is.
it makes
It
her
is. Again,
evil.
I don't think it's bad writing.
Mm-hmm.
I just dislike the character for it.
Yeah, I also intensely dislike Vi for it, and I think it was brilliant writing because there's
beautiful writing.
There's her dad, and with his dying breath, he's asking her to take care of Powder, and he does not know.
Yes.
What Vi finds out moments later is this person who she is heartbroken, her father figure has died, and her father figure is not saying I love you, Vi, but saying take care of Powder. Powder shows up, and Vi discovers that Powder is the reason that he has died. And so the sibling jealousy of she just lost her father. Her father is telling her to take care, not saying anything about the two of them, but saying something about her other sibling. And then actually her other sibling caused it all. And she emotionally explodes at her and leaves.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
right.
And we get all the tension of, I mean, okay. Who thought that Silco was going to, if not kill, at least do something particularly nasty to Powder? I mean, did you expect what happened?
I don't know. I was so caught up in the drama. I don't think, and this is rare, I don't think I was prognosticating at that point. I think I was just watching.
The story was too good for you to be in the editor brain. You were just in it.
Even stuff I enjoy, that is not always true. Like when I watch a Marvel movie, even a good one, I'm like, okay, I see what's going here. Like, and occasionally they would surprise me, but not that often. This one I wasn't even trying. I was just watching.
Yeah, I was just taking it in. Yeah.
I gotta say, I was so far into Team Powder that when he hugs her, I was cheering because I cheered up. He is the engineer, technical genius, magic researcher of Zahn, and now he's taking her under her wing. She's going to actually get to learn to do some stuff with her skills.
And I'm sure
somebody cares. Yeah. Somebody was there for her in that moment. In that moment when she needed it, he was there for her. Yeah. And like when he like picked her up and hugged her, and you see her arms go around him from the back. And it's from Vi's perspective that you see that, and you're like, you just realize that Vi realizes what she's lost, even if she doesn't understand the full magnitude of it. But
doesn't she get arrested right then, though? Too, like, doesn't she?
Marcus puts his hand over her mouth so she won't make noise because he says,
right. Because this is what gave me. This is how I was able to end the episode not hating Vi, is because, like, the way I see it is I had the same initial reaction you did, where I'm like, I get that you're hurting Vi, but you now have a responsibility.
Yeah.
You have a duty and you should fulfill it. But if I'm honest with myself, I've lashed out at people I've loved verbally before.
Yeah.
But I had a chance to turn around and apologize for it. You know, I've been wrong. I've taken out my temper on a loved one who didn't really deserve it. I mean, not like viciously, but
sure.
I've said shit that I shouldn't have said to people who didn't deserve to hear it.
I have to. Yeah.
And I then had the opportunity, usually fairly quickly, to realize I went too far. I'm really sorry. I love you. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. That was uncalled for. And
Yeah.
I think Vi would have done the same thing, but she doesn't get a chance. You know, like I feel like that's what makes these miscommunications more acceptable and more compelling in the story, is that I don't think Vi was going to walk away and just leave Powder there forever and ever. I think she would have turned around and went back for her, but Marcus doesn't give her the chance. She's in prison and Silco has Powder. Like I feel like in my interpretation, that's why I can still like Vi, even though she fucked up really badly with her sister, is because I'm like, yeah, no, maybe. Like, if my dad just died and all our friends, and I've been defending my kid sister against valid criticisms of her performance on missions for a long time, and the last straw is she killed our dad, I might be a little unreasonable for a minute or two.
And her
as well.
brothers.
And your brothers. Yeah, I might be unreasonable for a minute or two as well, but she doesn't get the third minute to turn around and do the right thing. You know, like that's how it plays out for me. And I understand if it doesn't for you, but I think that's how it works out for me.
Yeah. See, I feel like, and again, this is very splitting hairs. And if this is how they wrote it, then again, this is just like superb skill, right? Because I feel like the amount of time that they showed us that Powder was crying, pleading with her sister to come back, and Vi wasn't coming back. I don't think Vi started coming back to her until Silco showed up, if I'm correct.
It's been longer since I've seen the episode. You might be right.
And I think that they were showing us that amount of time to allow us to see that she could have gone back. She could have gone back and said, no, I'm sorry. It's okay. You know, let's just get out of here. We'll figure it out.
Or even if she was still being mean, at least not leave her sister in the street.
At least not leave her alone. Yeah. But she didn't.
That's a fair criticism. But again, like, it's on the knife's edge of,
Well, and that's what's so beautiful about it. And that's what's so brilliant about the writing, is that it's up to each one of us to kind of look at that and see that, you know, all we know is that, you know, it's, we know what we each individually saw, but both characters have sympathetic positions here, you know? So again, I ask you, who's good and who's bad?
Yeah. Well,
but I also walked down the aisle to the Imperial March at my wedding. So maybe I'm not a fully unbiased person.
Yeah, I mean, and it was tough to still it was. I'm not saying it wasn't an effort to try to see it from Vi's perspective more, because it was. I mean, I've had my adult life has been defined by responsibility for the people I lead, for my own kids. You know, that's that's the bedrock of how I live with myself, is discharging those responsibilities as best I can. So yeah, when she doesn't, it's like, ooh, that's a big problem for me. But then I'm soul searching, what if, the last time I said something kind of terrible to one of my kids, even, I lost my temper on my kids, and I take a sniper's bullet and can't take it back,
right.
Fanciful, but theoretically, or I get hit by a bus, and can't take it back. It's that could happen. I mean, obviously it's a reminder to be more careful with your words.
Right.
But yeah, no, that enabled me to have a little more empathy, but I totally see what you're saying. And it's a completely valid read on it as well, which again, like you said, makes it beautiful writing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. No, I thought it was, I loved it. There was one other thing though, too. So you mentioned, the two engineers working together, Victor and Jace, right? So I'm sorry. Here comes my
with their big discovery, or are we going somewhere else?
No. This is more of my literary criticism academic background coming out to play. One of the other things that I found very interesting was the number of couple,
pairs,
individual the number of pair dynamics that we got to explore in this episode, right? So you have these two young men, Victor and Jace, who are having this, scientific discovery process together, which is a bonding, a bonding experience. And then you have, some might say something to make them like brothers, right?
Mhm.
And then you have that juxtaposed against Silco and Vonder, who were like brothers, and that bond was broken. And
Yes.
this is the further breaking of that bond, right? The ultimate breaking of that bond, because it's their final confrontation.
Their Cain and Abel moment.
Yeah, exactly. And you have the two sisters, Vi and Powder, and they're the breaking of their bond. But then you also have Powder and Silco and the formation of a new bond. And I thought all of those different dynamics were very interesting. And I thought it was very cool the way that, this episode just kept kind of hitting on that, this is one illustration of a I don't want to say pair bond, because that usually has romantic connotations, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like a pair dynamic, maybe. I don't know.
Well, and our culture doesn't value the bonding of friendship highly enough. That's just true.
Well, can I caveat that though, Justin? I think our parent culture, as Americans maybe, or Western civilization doesn't, but the military does, and that is also our three culture.
Right.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And that's what makes it, having been a civilian for a few years now, and I do have close civilian friends, don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm living in my own cult where only other writers and veterans are allowed.
That'd be
a very specific personal ad.
Sorry, you either have to write science fiction and fantasy or have a DD 214. Otherwise, we can't talk. No,
Preferably both.
Yeah, I would have a very small customer base at that point.
Right. Also, fan base probably.
Yeah, no. So, but it stands out in stark contrast. As somebody who got out, who was in for 10 years and got out, it's like, yeah, no, and it's not. I find it in. I don't have anything against homosexual representation in shows. I don't mind if characters are gay. It's fine. There are homosexual people in the world. It's okay to depict that. I'm not going to get mad at you for it. What I do get mad at is when they try to make every close friendship between two people of the same gender, it's like, oh, well, that's gay. There are
relationships
for each other.
Relationships are sexual.
Yeah,
right.
It's like, no, Captain Kirk and Spock did not want to bang, nor did Frodo and Sam, nor do Victor and Jace, and it's like, it's okay to value platonic love. It's okay to value deep bonds that don't lead to sex and aren't genetic, that's something I really, I want to hit home is it's actually what makes Western, because I think it's eroding in Western civilization, but it's actually what makes Western civilization as effective as it has been historically is the fact that we do form non-romantic, non-sexual, deep bonds with people we are not closely related to or related to at all. It's what enables us. What's that?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead. I've talked.
I was going to say that's the whole basis behind community, right? We are bonded by the fact that we live in the same place and we have similar values, and so we stand up for one another. We fight for one another. We, we help one another. We support one another, and this is a rabbit hole, and maybe we want to redirect, but
we can can of worms it here in a second, but yeah.
One of the things that I find fascinating about watching the evolution of internet culture is because one of the most valuable things that people always talk about the internet is how it allows people to find their tribe no matter where they're located, right? So especially for nerds like us, if it's not as hard as it used to be to find some people to run a D&D campaign with, because you can do it online and with people who are in Japan and in New York City, I mean, it's not that you just have to coordinate time zones, which is a pain, but you can do it.
Speaking of which, we should, but go ahead.
We totally should. the friendship dynamics that exist on the internet are endlessly fascinating to me, because even though, I mean, sure, you can have, you know, a sexual component to your relationship if your relationship exists on the internet. But it's not the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not trying to I'm again rabbit hole, but I'm not trying to argue that you can't have a romantic relationship online, because a lot of people do. But I think it's almost more acceptable to have a non-sexual, non-romantic, you know, deep friendship with someone that you've never even met in person online than it is to have that type of close connection with someone that you live next door to.
Yeah. I mean, Tom Kratman was my friend and mentor for like 10 years before I met him in person.
Yeah.
You know,
Marisa Wolf, who
Mhm.
I've written 3 books with now, is, you know, she and I had written stories together for 15 years before we ever met in person. And now I almost can't go on a vacation without her coming along. You know.
And I mean, Kacey, we've met at 2 Liberty Cons in
That's right.
person, never else.
That's
Joelle,
right.
Joelle and I still haven't met in person.
I met Kacey once at a Liberty Con.
Once at Liberty Con.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right. The internet is, for all its truly dreadful flaws, because they exist, it is a wonderful tool for that. And that was, I'm good with that tangent. It's staying in the video. I think it's a valid observation, even though we are kind of far afield from Arcane at this point.
Well, but it just goes to show that, like, you know, at the core of this story, it's about interpersonal dynamics. I mean, yes, it's about class warfare, and yes, it's about, you know,
but that's relegated properly to, it's a background theme, and you're in it because you care about the characters experiencing it, not because you can disagree with the premise of the show. And I'm kind of certain I do, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it is like, when you really boil it down, it's a left-leaning show, and I'm not a left-leaning person, but it's done so well that it's like, no, you're disagreeing with me, but you're entertaining me, and you're being intellectually honest while you're disagreeing with me. So I will watch the shit out of your show, even if I suspect that me and the writers would not vote for any policy.
Right.
Similarly.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt.
and also it's beautiful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I just got so enthusiastic when you pointed that out.
Yeah, they have excellent storytelling and beautiful visuals, and all of it works together to give us a compelling story, and we don't have to agree on everything to love it.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And I feel like this episode's interesting, and both the episode we're reviewing and this episode that we're recording, in that this has such a powerful central arc and climax that it's kind of like you can talk about just that primary driver for the entire time. But yeah, no, I great episode. Like, I mean, I was interested from episode 1 and 2, but 3 was really where it hits the gas, man, and it does not really let up. In my opinion,
wish we could screenshot because we have a group text to coordinate these things. I wish we could screenshot what I sent to you guys after. That was literally after I finished watching it. I was like, I sent them. I was like, episode 3, OMG, like 15 exclamation points.
Yeah, I mean, like, that ending is so shocking, you know. Like,
and at that point, I hadn't watched it yet. So as soon as I had a moment for you, it was like, all right. That it's definitely not going where I thought it was. It's not going to be some boring guerrilla warfare where we gradually lose all the family. That there's going to be something really neat that happens, and I was not disappointed.
Yeah. And furthermore, the last thing to point out is, well, not the last thing, but something about the surprises is all of them are organic and flow logically from the characters and story. You know, because it's really easy to throw in a random U-turn in the story and just say, because things that weren't on screen, deal with it. And that's, you know, the it's now a dirty term, subverting expectations. You know, it's like, oh, well, I wanted to subvert your expectations. It's like, yes, but you didn't earn it. You know, you didn't actually set this up properly. Arcane surprises the shit out of you, but it earned it. You know, it was like, no, I set all, the writers were like, we set all of this up. This was all in motion. And this is a completely as logical a result as what you were probably expecting we'd do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, we talked about that a little bit when we were talking about episode 2, that, like, they laid the groundwork with the, you know, in the very first episode of the show, for, you know, for that is how you subvert an expectation, because they laid the groundwork for the expectation that Silco was a dastardly mustache twirling dude.
And that's
then an
definitely a
episode,
component of him.
and yeah, for sure. I mean, dude injects a cat with glowy stuff. Bad idea, right? Like,
Obviously
it's
using children for violent ends. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And then, well, I guess he injected a kid too. I should probably focus on that.
Yeah, you keep focusing on the kitties. I'm a little worried about you there, Kacey.
Yeah, right. Then now, just 2 episodes later, we see him like provide nurture and comfort to a grieving, like heartbroken child. And in the in-between, we see why. We know why. And yeah, it's probably also for nefarious reasons too, because he's like, here you are, you're like me, I can make you like me. You've been betrayed, I've been betrayed. You know, we have that in common.
And he also just stole Vonder's daughter.
Yeah.
And he also just stole Vonder's daughter, right? Yeah.
Ultimate victory.
About whom Vonder's last words were to take care of her. Yeah. So yeah, it's again, it's very, very beautifully done. And that is how you subvert the expectation. You set up, you know, the expectation is this guy does nothing but evil stuff. And then you show him doing
one more thing about this episode, and then I think we're about ready to wrap up. The title, The Base Violence Necessary for Change. I don't want that to be true. I don't want it to be true about reality, that you would need violence to make a change that matters. In this world, though, in the world of Arcane, it sure looks like a lot of characters have reason to believe that there is no possibility of positive change without violence.
And are they right? Because we already have the countervailing example of Jace and Victor. You know, we have 2 people who came from nothing and succeeded, so it's clearly possible. But is it possible enough that the civilization is still a just one?
And perhaps it wasn't true, because Grayson and Vander had a thing going where people were kind of okay for a while, except that we are finding out that possibly the setup to make that time of temporary peace possible was Vander attacking Silco and trying to drown him.
Yeah.
And so it's one of my this show, while like I said, I expect I might not agree with much that the screenwriters believe, just guessing. I don't know. They're not active on Twitter or anything that I know of. But part of my core philosophy of life is that there is right and wrong. Like, there is actually a moral answer to everything. However, with your limited understanding, you're unlikely to find the actual truly correct answer. So we are all using approximations. We are all rounding off to the best solution we can think of, because we can't actually think of the one that's truly, absolutely, 100% morally correct given the situation we're in. Because the truth is, operating in the real world, somebody gets hurt. No matter what you do, especially and including nothing, somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
So you have to do something or accept the moral responsibility of doing nothing. And there's no true way to stay completely clean. So if you're going to have a conscience, you're just going to have to do complex moral calculations to the best of your ability and the time you have to do them, and with the variables you have available to you. And I feel like this show encapsulates that very well. And just about all the fiction I love has an element of that. You know, that it's like, this is a situation where somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get killed. And you're in a position where you get to pick. Have fun.
Yeah. And I think we can say as veterans and soon to be veterans that all of us recognize that violence is a strong factor in determining what happens, and that it is effective, and that there's not a world where there is no violence at all. Yet at the same time, being in a military service, we are trying to be focused, controlled violence in a specific way in order to support the conditions for a lasting peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when does the violence, and that's the trick of what we do and what honestly our policy making leaders actually do, because we were all at the tactical level, not the strategic level as officers, is what level of violence is necessary to actually resolve the issue. What level of violence will just continue to fuel the problem and exacerbate it. And calculating that is, often damn near impossible. I mean, I don't want to get too far onto the weeds in current events, but the conduct of our last wars indicates to me that no one was seriously considering what would be necessary to create stable, friendly democracies in countries with no tradition of that.
Right.
Right. And I think, being honest, we are incapable as a culture of that level of sustained violence. So it was probably a doomed, hindsight is 2020. It was probably a doomed effort as soon as we started down that road, because
I find it interesting that as often as the United States is accused of imperialism, we're actually pretty bad at it.
We're terrible at it. We refuse to actually do it. And in my deep heart of hearts, I sometimes suspect the world might be a better place if we could do it without losing our soul. But I'm not sure that's not paradoxical. To do what would be necessary to be like, okay, Pashtuns, your culture is now different. You do not abuse little children, and you value women equally to men. To make that work, like the oceans of blood you would have to spill.
Well, and it's not just blood; it's time, right?
Yeah,
it takes generations.
Time. Yeah,
the United States has very successfully created 2 democracies in the last 100 years, and I'm living in one of them. Well, technically it's constitutional monarchy, but you know what I'm saying, right? Japan and Germany. Okay. Oceans of blood were spilled first for both of them. We literally created a new type of world-ending weapon and deployed it twice here in Japan in order to make that happen. And then...
Actually, our borrowed German scientists did that.
Well, yeah. Yes, no, I'm aware.
Borrowed. We didn't steal everything from Germany.
But I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm still here in Japan. That's
and you're not really an occupying force, but you are still there.
But I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm still here. And our commitment to Japan is still here. Because we, it was funny. I was actually just reading about this. After World War II, just shorthand, the Japanese military was completely dismantled because we were occupying, we had occupied the country. We rewrote the Constitution. The Constitution of Japan was ratified. The government was restructured kind of in our own image. I actually have a really interesting theory about golf courses about that I'll tell you guys at some point. But because they're everywhere here. And anyway. So we rebuilt Japan kind of to our own specifications. And part of that is severe restrictions on their military growth. Japan has always been a regional power in this in the Indo-Pacific area. And as part of our commitment to them, we're like, listen, we're not going to let you rebuild your military, but we'll be here. Now, those positions have changed slightly, and Japan actually does have a very robust self-defense force now, which is great for us and also for them because it's needed. Yeah. It's needed here in this region. But the point is, we're still here. Like we are still a part of it, and it has been. World War II was my father's generation, actually just slightly before my father's generation, because my dad had me pretty young, So
my first ship was home ported into Japan. We have an entire 7th Fleet of the United States.
Yeah, 7th Fleet's just down the road.
Out of not the United States, not an island that we've claimed. Nope. An island that is part of Japan.
Yep.
Likewise, my first duty station was Germany.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, 3 generations of Watsons, my father, myself, my daughter, none of us with a drop of German blood that I'm aware of, all born in Germany.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so that's like
It-
3 generations of an American family, all
It takes
born.
oceans of blood and generations of time.
Yeah. And that was with countries that had, if not democratic traditions, bureaucratic, stable federal government.
Stable government traditions. Yeah.
That it was like, it was not unusual that you would have a central government that isn't fully corrupt, is somewhat functional, and whose authority is recognized by the citizens and the regional governments of the country. That wasn't a foreign and alien concept to Japan or Germany. It is to Afghanistan.
Right.
Afghanistan didn't first have a Kaiser.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Or an emperor. Yeah.
Yeah. And Iraq had a dictator, obviously, but no tradition of anything we would recognize as an enlightened representational government of any sort,
Right.
So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And furthermore, I'll say one other thing that like looking into the uglier aspects of it, oceans of blood to begin with. And I will also note that the few nascent insurgency attempts in Germany, there were the werewolf movement, there was a couple. We just shot them. We stood them up against a wall and we shot them at the first sign of trouble. And we probably got it wrong sometimes. There were probably innocent people who got caught up in that, but we crushed it as soon as it reared its head. And I compare that with what I was doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm like, catch and release. Like we're trying to do police work in a war zone, and there's no way we can establish American style we can establish a burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt on every insurgent we capture, and they know they can surrender, and we generally won't shoot them.
And police work is really hard, even in the United States, where folks mostly think that the police are the good guys. The police are having a hard time, and service members are trained to be police. They don't know how to do it right.
So it's and so all that to say, if you're going to go on an imperial adventure, you should be ready for the moral consequences of that. And we never were. And Arcane is really good.
You should totally watch Arcane. This is not a sponsored video.
So sorry for the huge tangents, and I know I contributed to them.
No, I started that with the discussion of the title about
it's awesome though.
Change.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right.
Yeah,
and it speaks to the power of the show that it puts us in mind of our own experiences in the real world and makes us examine them critically and try to parse them as best we can.
I do wonder if any showrunners who somehow heard about this kind of reaction from us would be like, yeah, that's what we were trying to tell people like them. Or like, why are those people even watching our show? Okay. Any last observations before we close out? I think we
parting shots.
I think we got that vein well tapped.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Oh,
yeah. So as per usual, if you liked the video, please consider a comment. If you're listening to this on audio, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast venue. As always, Joelle and Kacey's work will be in the description below. Kacey, what's out next and what's out most recently?
Let's see what's coming out next. Coming out next for me is an anthology called No Game for Knights that I'm editing with Larry Correa. It's coming out in September, and it is a collection of noir stories that focus on the character archetype of the noir detective. So we got some really, really cool stories in there. Larry's got a great story. Laurel K. Hamilton is joining us again for that.
Nice.
And yeah, no, she was excited to do it, and we were like, yes, please.
That's awesome. Congrats again.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of great stories. And I forgot what your other question was.
And what's out most recently?
Oh, what's out most recently? My most recent novel is the third book in my Psyche of War series. It's a story about a psychic woman who goes to Vietnam to find her missing son. Like I said, third installment. They're all standalones, so you could read them in any order. But chronologically, they go book 1, 2, 3 because that's how numbers work. So,
and they're all really good. You should read them.
Thank you.
Joelle, what's out next, and what's out most recently that people can find now?
All right. So my first novel just by me without a co-writer is Dabber, a Snake Launcher, which is out in November. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you can get a free short story that goes with that. And also, by the time this airs, there's a anthology coming out, Chicks in Tank Tops from Bailey.
Yes,
I saw the cover art on
Yes.
Facebook.
it's great cover art.
The initial cover art has been leaked by the cover artist. The title and everything else all formatted with the back cover might be out by the time we record this. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I'll be sharing that. So Chicks in Tank Tops has a short story by me, again set in the same universe as Dabber, a Snake Launcher.
Mm-hmm.
And
nice.
Sometimes you have titles that you like, but you don't think the editor will let them through. But the editor let me use it. And so the title of that short story that is in Chicks in Tank Tops is Barbie and Gatorkin versus the Hurricane.
So I know the editor of that anthology, and I'm not at all surprised that he liked that.
Does it take place in Florida?
It actually takes place in Hampton Roads.
Okay.
Hampton Roads, Virginia.
Gotcha. Sorry, my brain immediately went to Florida, man.
Yeah.
All right, so awesome. Please definitely check out Kacey and Joelle's work below. They're both excellent writers. And if you would like to read some of my stuff or some of the stuff I've written with Kacey, all one book of it, it'll be in the description below. That's all the time we have for Lore and Valor. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time, and until then, keep up the fire.
Bye.
Bye.